This project is inspired by one of the main characters from The Great Crochet Animal Rescue, a colorful picture book where you can crochet the characters to help you bring the story to life. Alright, so to get started, we're going to need to tie a magic loop with our main body color. So we'll take our main body color and about 4 inches or so of it, and then with our left hand, we're going to, with our index finger and our middle finger, pinch that working yarn using our thumb to those 2 fingers. Then with our right hand, we're going to wrap that top yarn around the back side of our fingers, cross it over the yarn that's already wrapped around and pinched, wrap it around the bottom part of our fingers, and then wedge that yarn in place underneath our thumb. Once we have all those things wrapped, we can take our hook, we'll go underneath that top loop and then hook the bottom loop, flip our hand over and bring our hook alongside, and then we're going to use our right index finger and thumb to grab both the loop on our hook and the loop on the back of our fingers. We'll let go with our thumb and then carefully slide all of those loops off of our left hand. Then we're going to take our left hand index finger and tension the working yarn. I'm still pinching with my right hand here. We'll tension the working yarn over our left index finger and then grab where that tail and the loop are twisted together with our thumb and the rest of our fingers. Then we're going to pull our tensioned yarn a little bit, so pull with your index finger on your left hand, and then yarn over and pull the working yarn through the loop that we've just tied. Once you've done that, your magic loop is locked in place, so you don't have to worry about it coming undone. We'll also want to untangle our magic loop tail here. So to do that, we'll just pull it out of the loop that we've already created. There it goes. And we're ready to start our first round. And when we work our first round, we're also going to work over that tail, so I like to hold them together with my left hand. Alright, so to make the main body, we're going to start off by placing 8 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring. So I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker nearby because we're going to need it after we make our first single crochet stitch. So to make our first single crochet stitch here in our magic ring, we're going to take our hook and we're going to go through that ring underneath both strands of both the ring and the tail. Then we'll grab our working yarn, pull it through and up a little bit into that magic ring, and then to finish off our single crochet, we'll yarn over and pull through both of the loops on our hook. Once you've done that, I like to tighten this first stitch down a little bit by pulling the full stitch over to the right just a touch. And then once you're done with that stitch, you'll want to mark it. So I'm going to slip my stitch marker through both loops of that stitch to mark it. And we're going to repeat that process of creating single crochet stitches until we have 8 total. So let's do this next one together as well. So we'll go through the loop and under both the tail and the loop, grab our working yarn, pull it through and up, and then yarn over and pull through both loops again to finish our next single crochet stitch. So we need 8 of these total. Okay, I have all 8, but I'm going to really quickly double check that I have all 8 by pulling that last stitch loop that I made up. I'm going to set my hook down, And if you look, you can see the end of each round has a number, and that's how many stitches you need to have in your round when you finish. So let's count and see that we have the correct number, which should be 8, before we close our magic loop. So if you look, you can see my first stitch here, I've marked it. It forms a little V. That's my first stitch. Then I have my second stitch here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I have all 8 stitches in my magic ring. So I'm going to put my hook back in place, tighten down that loop, and I'm ready to do the magic ring part of my magic ring. I'm going to take that tail end and I'm going to give it a tug until it tightens all of my stitches into a round. Alright, that's the first round done. We're ready to move on to round 2. Alright, so for round 2, we need to increase in each stitch all the way around. So we've marked the first stitch that we completed in our magic ring. We're going to want to continue marking that first stitch because it tells us where our round starts and stops. So go ahead and take your stitch marker out. Make sure you don't lose track of where that first stitch is, because that's where we're going to be working. We need to place an increase in this first stitch. And to increase, we're going to put 2 single crochet stitches in the same place. So to make our first single crochet stitch, we're going to go through both loops of that V that forms that stitch. So from front to back, you'll push your hook through, then yarn over and pull through both of those and up a little bit to draw up a loop. Then you'll yarn over again and pull through all of the loops on your hook. So before we do our increase, let's go ahead and mark that stitch because that's the first stitch in our round. Then to complete our increase, we need to place another single crochet stitch in the same space that we just worked in. So if you look, you can see our stitches going through this hole underneath this V. We need to put another one in that exact same spot. So we'll push our hook again from front to back through the bottom of that stitch, yarn over, draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through both to complete our increase. So if you look, you can see we have 2 V's coming out of the same hole here. So we'll continue working around, working in the next V that we have, pushing our hook from front to back through, yarning over, drawing up a loop, drawing through another loop, putting another single crochet stitch in that same space. And we'll continue putting 2 single crochet stitches in each stitch all the way around until we get back to our stitch marker. Alright, so if you look, I am almost all the way around. I just have 1 stitch left. So I'm going to go ahead and place my last 2 single crochet stitches, my last increase. And then I'm going to take my magic loop tail and I'm going to give it another tug to sort of tighten up that center hole. And then I'm also going to take my scissors and snip this tail shorter so it stays out of my way while I'm working. Alright, that wraps up round number 2. We're ready to go on to round 3. Alright, so for round 3, we're going to start our first pattern increase. So just like before, we're going to take our stitch marker out. And we're going to start off by placing just 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of this round. So pushing our hook through, yarning over, drawing up a loop, yarning over and drawing through all the loops on your hook. We're going to mark that stitch. We'll do this every single time we make our first stitch. Okay, so now that we have our first stitch, our pattern's telling us that we need to do 1 single crochet stitch, and then in the next, place an increase, which is, as we know, 2 single crochet stitches. So here's our first increase. And then this pattern is telling us that we need to repeat everything that's inside of the parentheses 8 times total all the way around to complete this row. So we've just done what's inside the parentheses once. We need to do it 7 more times. So the next stitch will be a single crochet stitch, and then an increase in the next. There's the second repetition of that parentheses. I'll continue repeating that all the way around until I get to my stitch marker at the end of the round. Alright, so here's my last stitch of the round, and I'm ending on an increase, which is great because that's what I need to end on. If you've gotten to this point and you're maybe not on an increase, maybe you're supposed to make a single crochet stitch based on where you are in the parenthesis pattern, it would be a good time to go back and double check your stitch count. So let me make my last stitch and then I'll show you how you can go about doing that. So if you find that you maybe didn't end on the right stitch, you can pull your last stitch up. And then I like to go around and look and see how many stitches I have and how many are coming out of each stitch from the previous round. So we know this is our first stitch. If you look, you can see our next stitch is coming out of that same space. There's these 2 here. Then we've got 1, there's another 2, 1, another 2. Continue working around, just double checking and see if you can find a place where maybe you didn't increase when you needed to, or maybe you made 2 single crochets back to back, or maybe you only put 1 single crochet and needed to put 2 in the same space. I'm basically saying the same thing just in different ways. Double check to see if any of those stitches don't look correct. And if you find that you get to that spot, like let's say maybe right here was incorrect, you can either slip your hook through that stitch or you can pinch and then pull your working yarn until your stitches come out to where you made your mistake. Then you can put your hook back in and then continue your pattern until you've corrected your mistake. Alright, that wraps up this round for me. I'm ready to move on to my next round. Alright, so I'm starting in on round 4. Round 4, we're going to begin by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. Mark that stitch like we have been all the way through the project so far. Then we're going to increase in the next stitch. And now that we've done that, we're going to do the same thing we did with the last round. We're going to repeat everything that's inside of those parentheses all the way around until we get to our last stitch. So we'll start off by placing 1 single crochet in the next stitch, another single crochet in the next stitch. So those are those 2 single crochet. They don't go in the same space because remember that's an increase. So 2 single crochet, 1 in each of the last 2 stitches, and then an increase. And then we're going to repeat everything that's inside of that parentheses 7 times total. So there's my first repetition. There's my second. And we'll continue that until we get to our last stitch. Alright, so I'm wrapping up the end of that repetition. And if you look, it says before the end of the patterned round, right before our stitch count, we have 1 single crochet left to make to finish off this round. And here's my last stitch. I'll place a single crochet stitch inside. And that wraps up this round. Alright, so for round 5, we're going to continue increasing by placing 1 single crochet stitch in each of the next 3 stitches. So there's my first one. Here's my second and third. And then we will increase in that next stitch. And we'll repeat everything inside those parentheses 8 times total, all the way around our piece. Alright, I am wrapping up the end of that round with an increase. Alright, and before we move on to our next round, you may have noticed your disc is starting to kind of curl on itself a little bit. That's okay, it's just because we have 8 stitches here in our center ring. So you can sort of fold this disc so that the right side, which is the side that's been facing us this whole time, is facing out. And then that curl sort of starts to curl in and hide the wrong side, which you can see here. It's the side that our magic ring tail's on too. That's going to continue to kind of curl like that. It's totally normal, just kind of keep it folded under. Alright, we're ready for our next round. Okay, so for round 6, we're going to start off by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches. So there's our first. Here's our second. And then we'll increase the next stitch. And now we're ready to start our pattern increase by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches. And then increasing in the next stitch after that. And then repeating that pattern of 4 single crochet increase until we get all the way around our round. Alright, so I just finished my last increase We'll end this round by placing 1 single crochet in the last 2 stitches. And that wraps up this round. Alright, so for round 7, we're going to place 1 single crochet in each of the next 7 stitches. So there's my first. Alright, there are my first 7, and then I'm going to place an increase in the next stitch. So we'll do that 5 more times, everything that's inside that parentheses, until we're all the way around our round. Alright, I'm wrapping up my 7 single crochet, ready to place my last increase in the round. And that wraps up this round. Alright, so for round number 8, we're going to start off by placing 1 single crochet stitch in each of the next 4 stitches. So don't forget to put your marker back in that first stitch. So there's my first single crochet stitch. Alright, there are those 4 stitches. Then we'll increase. And then we're going to repeat everything that's inside of those parentheses, which is going to be 8 single crochet stitches. And then an increase. We'll repeat that until we get to our last 4 stitches of the round. Alright, so there's my last increase. Then I'm going to place 1 single crochet stitch in each of the next 4 single crochet stitches to wrap up this round. Alright, so we're ready to move on to the next round. Alright, so for rounds 9 and 10, all we need to do is place 1 single crochet stitch in each of the stitches for both rounds. So there's my first. I'll continue placing single crochet stitches, just 1 in each, for the next 2 rounds. So I will see you when I get to the end of my second round. Alright, so I'm getting ready to wrap up round 10. And before I make my last stitch, we actually need to change colors. So we're starting in on the back of the hedgehog now. So to make our color change, we're going to need to start off our last stitch just like we normally would, by going through, yarning over and drawing up a loop. but we need to draw through both of these loops on our hook with our new color. So I'm going to go ahead and set my work down and cut myself just a little bit of a tail with the white, and we're done with that one now. We're going to grab our new color, which is this brown. Then I like to make a little loop with it. So I'll fold it over on top of itself, kind of pinch it between my fingers. And then I'll hook that loop on my hook and pull it through both of those stitches. And if you look, you can see this white is a little loose. So I'm going to take that white tail, I'm going to pull it tight. And then the brown also gets just a little bit loose, but we can fix that by tensioning our working yarn and by grabbing both the brown and the white tail. So between tensioning and holding onto those tails will sort of help tighten up those colors. Alright, so we've changed colors and we're ready to start in on our next round. Alright, so for round 60, we're going to be both working in our color change tails and starting a new kind of stitch. So it's called a back loop only single crochet. It's abbreviated BLO. The way that we'll do that is if you look at the little V that forms each of our stitches, of course I've already taken my stitch marker out here, we're going to be working in just the back part. So the front is the one that's closest to the surface of our work, the side that's been facing us this whole time. We're going to be working in just that back loop. We also need to work in the two tails left over from our color change. So if you hold those behind your work as you go, and then push your hook through just that back loop of our last single crochet stitch, we'll go ahead and yarn over and pull through, then yarn over and pull through both. That's our first stitch of the round, so we're going to go ahead and mark it. And then we're going to continue working only in the back loop all the way around on this round, and also working in our tail end. There's my second back loop only single crochet. Here's my third. I'll work my tails in for a few stitches. That should do it. Now that I've worked my stitches in, or my tails in for a couple of stitches, I'm going to go ahead and cut those short. And I'm going to continue working just in the back loop, one in each back loop for each stitch, all the way around this round. Alright, I'm getting ready to wrap up that first round in our new color. Alright, and I'm ready to move on to my next round. Alright, so for round 12, we're going to again be working just in the back loops only. And we're going to place one back loop only single crochet stitch in each of the stitches all the way around. Again, don't forget to mark your first stitch. And you can see our back loop only round, since we left one of our loops behind, it sort of leaves a bit of a line on your work. So as you keep working around and you start to notice that, that's what we want. Right, so we'll place one back loop only single crochet stitch in each of the stitches all the way around this round. Alright, I'm almost at the end of my round. Here's my last stitch. Alright, and I'm ready to move on to the next round. Alright, so for round 13, all we need to do is place one regular single crochet, so not just in the back loop, in both loops, all the way around, marking our first stitch like we have been this whole time. So we'll place one single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. Alright, I'm almost at the end of this round. Here's my last stitch. And I'm ready to move on to the next round. Alright, so for round 14, we're back to putting one single crochet stitch in the back loops only of every stitch of the previous round. So again, remember your back loop only is just the one that isn't on the surface, it's just the one here. And we'll continue putting a single crochet in that back loop only all the way around. Alright, I'm almost all the way around. There's my last stitch, and I'm ready to move on in my pattern. Alright, so before we move on, it's time to attach our safety eyes. So I'm going to pull my last loop up long, and then we need to figure out where they go on our hedgehog. So our pattern says they go between rounds 5 and 6, and we need to leave 7 single crochet stitches between our eyes. So if you're using safety eyes, go ahead and grab those here. However, if this is for a young child or maybe a pet, I would recommend sewing your eyes on instead. Whichever you decide, you know best. Alright, so between rounds 5 and 6, so I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker down to the bottom here because I don't want this jog that we get whenever we start our next round to kind of affect where my safety eyes go. So I'm going to go ahead and count from the center ring, which is round 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's between rounds 5 and 6 and about 7 stitches apart. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to say here and here for my safety eyes. So let me grab those. I'll push my first one through the fabric of my work. Then let me count and see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches. And then I'll place my second safety eye here. So there are my safety eyes placed. I'm going to go ahead and take the backs and snap them on. Alright, now that my safety eyes are on, I'm ready to reinsert my hook back through this loop, pull my working yarn down tight, and I'm going to continue working around. Alright, so I'm ready for round 15. I'm going to go take my stitch marker out, and we're going to start off by placing one single crochet stitch in the next 8 stitches. And again, we're not working in the back loop, we're working in the regular both front and back loop. So there's my first single crochet stitch. And then we're going to decrease. So when we increase, we place 2 single crochet stitches in the same space. When we decrease, we need to make 1 single crochet stitch take up 2 stitches. So to do that, we're going to take our hook and go from front to back just like we normally would through our next stitch. Draw up a loop, but then before we finish the stitch off, we're going to start a second stitch. So take your hook, push it through the next stitch, draw up a loop, and then we'll draw through all 3 loops by yarning over and pulling through. And that's how we'll make a decrease each time we get to it. So we need to make 8 single crochet stitches, 1 in each of the next 8 stitches. And then we'll decrease again. Let's practice that together one more time. We'll go front to back through our next stitch, yarn over and drop a loop. Then go front to back through the stitch after that, yarn over and drop a loop. Then yarn over and draw through all the loops to decrease. So we'll continue that pattern all the way around until we get to our stitch marker. Alright, I'm on my last 2 stitches, which are a decrease. And I'm ready to start my next round. Alright, so we're ready for round 16, and we're going to be working in the back loops again for this round. So we're going to make 7 back loop only single crochet stitches, and then a back loop only decrease. So here's my first and then second back loop only single crochet, Alright, so to do a back loop only single crochet decrease, it's going to be just like our regular decrease, except we're only going to be working in these back loops. So we'll take our hook and push it through the back loop of the first stitch, yarn over and draw up a loop, and then take our hook, push it through the back loop only of the next stitch, draw up a loop, and then yarn over and draw through all the loops. So we're going to continue this pattern of 7 back loop only single crochet, and then a back loop only single crochet decrease all the way around. Alright, so here's my last back loop only single crochet decrease. And that wraps up this round. Alright, so for round 17, we're going to be working in both loops of the row before, and we'll be placing 1 single crochet in the first 4 stitches. So here's my first one. And then decreasing in the next 2. And then we'll repeat that pattern of 4 single crochet stitches and then a decrease all the way around. Alright, I'm on my last decrease. And that wraps up this round. I'm ready for the next. Alright, so for round 18, we're working again in the back loops only. And we'll start by making one back loop only single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches. So here's my first. Here's my second. And my third. And then we'll do a back loop only single crochet decrease. And then continue repeating that pattern all the way around. Alright, so here's my last back loop only single crochet decrease. And I'm ready to move on to my next round. Alright, so for round 19, we're going to continue decreasing by placing one single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches. We're not working in the back loops anymore. So here's my first single crochet stitch, and my next, and then we'll decrease. And then continue that same pattern all the way around. Great, here's my last decrease. And I'm ready for the next round. Alright, so we're ready for round 20. So we're going to go ahead and in the back loops again, work one single crochet stitch, and then a back loop only single crochet decrease. And then we'll repeat that all the way around. Alright, here's my last decrease. And I'm going to go ahead and stuff my hedgehog at this point. So I'm going to pull my last stitch up long, set my hook aside for now, and then take some stuffing and add it to the body. If you used safety eyes, I'm always a little careful whenever I stuff because the backs sometimes can push the eye so that it looks strange. So just be really careful as you add stuffing. Got my stuffing added, so I'm going to go ahead and put my hook back in that last loop. And I'll tighten down my last stitch. And I'm ready for my next round. Alright, so for round 21, we're going to decrease in every stitch all the way around. So there's my first decrease. Don't forget to mark that first decrease. Alright, here's my last decrease. I'm ready to fasten off, so I'm going to go ahead and take my stitch marker out. And then I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to slip stitch to the first stitch of this round. So to do that, I'll go through that decrease that I made, the very first one, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then rather than yarning over like we would with the single crochet, just pull that loop straight through the loop on our hook. Then we can fasten off by cutting ourselves a little bit of a tail. You don't need a ton, probably 4 to 6 inches. take that last slip stitch that we made and pull all the way through to fasten off. And then we need to sew this hole. My stuffing is coming out. We need to sew this hole closed. So to do that, we'll take the remainder of the tail that we cut, and we're going to thread this through the eye of our tapestry needle. And then we'll sew through the front loop only. So remember, our back loop is the one that's on kind of like on the inside that we've worked in. We're going to sew just through the front loops now. And we'll go from front to back and then whip stitch around, sewing through each one of those stitches. Once you've sewn through all 8 of those stitches, pull tight to cinch that closed, and then we'll tie a surface knot by looping our working tail over the surface of our body, then sewing down into the fabric of our work, and then up through that loop that we've made, and then holding that loop on the surface of our work, pull to tie a knot. Then we can weave this tail end in by sewing down into the body and then up through just a random spot, and then cutting that tail. And that wraps up the head and the body of our hedgehog. So next, we'll add the quills or the hair to the body. Alright, so to add the hair onto our hedgehog, we're going to be working on the back loop only row that we left behind. So it's technically the front loop because we crocheted in the back loop. So we're going to attach brown onto this very first row, but we need to make sure we're attached the right direction because when we work, we want the right side of our work to be facing. So if you look at your hedgehog's body, find the lowest white round that you can find. Mine's right here, and we're going to attach directly on to that. So to attach our brown on, we're going to take our crochet hook and then slip it underneath that first front loop left behind from our very first back loop only single crochet round. Then we'll grab our brown yarn, and to fasten on, it's sort of like a color change. We'll make a little loop, put that loop onto our hook, and then pull that loop through. And then, just like with the color change, we'll work that tail end in for each stitch that we make. So that loop that we just pulled on counts as our first single crochet stitch. So we need to chain 4, and then we're ready to start our next stitch. So our next stitch is that front loop only right to the left of the first stitch that we attached onto. So we'll hold our tail behind so we can work that in as we go, and then slip underneath that front loop only stitch. Then we'll make a single crochet, and then repeat that same process of chain 4, and then single crochet in the next front loop only. And we'll keep working all the way around until we get to our next front loop only round. Alright, so I'm almost all the way around that first front loop only round. Here's my my second to last. Alright, so here's my last stitch for that first round. And if you look, you can see all of the front loops left over that we have sort of jog a little bit. So we're going to continue the same chain 4 single crochet pattern. We'll just jump over to this next brown front loop only. And if you look, you can see as we work our way around, working on this one here, when we get to the end of this one, we'll connect to the next one and continue working around until we connect to this. And we'll work all the way that same chain 4 and then single crochet until we've put that same sort of ruffle pattern on all of these front loop only rounds. So let me make that first one here on the next so you can kind of see what it'll look like. So I'm going to chain 4, and then I'll just attach right to that next front loop only for my single crochet. And then continue that same pattern. All the way around until I get to that last round. So I will see you after the cut. Alright, so I'm just about to wrap up the spines here on my hedgehog. I've got 3 more stitches left, 3 more front loops. Alright, so here's my last one. So I'm ready to fasten off. So to do that, I'm going to cut myself a long tail. And then I'm going to pull a loop through this last single crochet that I made. So just pull straight through and then pull that loop up and out. And then we are ready to sew this tail end in. So go ahead and take your tail, grab a tapestry needle to thread the tail through. And then I'm going to tie a knot just because I don't want this last single crochet to be standing up kind of like it is. So surface knot here on the hedgehog's body. And then we'll weave that tail end into the body and up through a random spot. And snip close. And then you can sort of just ruffle the hedgehog's spines. And that is the body and the spines done. So let's move on to the nose. Alright, so we're ready to start the nose. So to start, we're going to begin by tying a magic loop, just like we did with the hedgehog's body. So again, index and middle finger on your left hand, and your thumb, of course. Pinch a 4-inch tail against that bottom digit on your left hand. With your right hand, wrap around the top part of your fingers, bring it around and cross it over what you've already wrapped and pinch. Wrap it around that bottom digit on your fingers, and then wedge it in against your thumb to hold it in place. Then with your crochet hook, go underneath that top loop closest to your fingertips and hook that bottom loop, pull it up, and then flip your hand over and bring your hook up and alongside your fingers. Then with your right index finger and thumb, pinch and hold both that loop on your hook and the loop on your fingers. Then very carefully let go with your thumb and slide gently all of those loops off of your hand. Then we'll take our left hand and we're going to tension our working yarn, and with the rest of our fingers pinch all of the other loops. Then tighten by tensioning. If you need to, you can pull with your other finger to tighten that loop that our hook's on. And then take your working yarn and pull a loop through to lock everything in place for our magic loop. Then we can untangle by pulling the tail out from the center of that loop. And we're ready to get started. So the nose begins with 6 single crochet made inside of our magic ring. So again, just like we did with the hedgehog's body, we're going to go under both the tail and the ring for the magic ring, yarn over and pull up a loop, then pull through both as our first single crochet. I like to tug mine over to the right to tighten it a little bit. And then we're going to need to mark that stitch that we've just made. And then we've got 5 more single crochets to make. Alright, there's 6 single crochet in my magic loop. Let's do the magic loop part by pulling the tail to tighten everything down into a round. And then we're ready to move on to our next round. Alright, so we're ready to start round 2. And round 2, we're going to place an increase in each stitch all the way around. So remember, just like when we were making the hedgehog's body, an increase is when you place 2 single crochet stitches in the same space. And don't forget to mark your first stitch for the round. So there's my first single crochet stitch. Here's my second in the same space, so my first increase is done. I'm going to keep working an increase in each stitch all the way around. Alright, here's my last increase. And then just like we did with the body, our magic ring needs another tighten, so pull that tail. And then we can also clip this. You don't have to clip it completely off. You can leave it a little short. Alright, that's round 2. We're ready for round 3. Okay, we're ready for our last round. And if you look in the parentheses, we've got 2 single crochet and then an increase. So we're going to start off by placing 1 single crochet stitch in our first stitch and marking it. Then we'll place another single crochet in the next stitch. That's those 2 single crochet stitches. And then we're going to increase in the stitch right after that. And then we're going to repeat that 3 more times. So here's my last increase. And that wraps up the crochet part of the nose. So we're going to go ahead and take our stitch marker out. And then we're going to slip stitch to that first stitch from this round. So right where that stitch marker had been. So front to back with your hook, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through to slip stitch. And then we're going to cut a tail, because we need a little bit of one to sew this nose on. Maybe 8 inches, you don't need much. And then we'll pull that last slip stitch all the way through, and then tighten. And now we're ready to embroider the nose onto the snout. Alright, so we're ready to embroider the nose onto the snout. So I'm going to take some of that dark brown that I used to make the hedgehog spines and thread it through a tapestry needle. Then I'm going to tie a knot at the end of this yarn by taking that end and holding it onto my needle. And then I'm going to wrap counterclockwise around 5 times or so, just like I've done here. Then I'm going to slide all of those wraps down the eye and over the eye of my needle. And then keep sliding, sliding, sliding until all of the wraps turn into a knot. Then to embroider the nose on, we'll make one flat straight stitch from about here to here, so over about 2 stitches worth of fabric. So going from the back to the front, and then front to back to sew a long straight stitch. We'll double that, so sew the exact same stitches again. Just like this. And then we'll make the mouth by sewing one straight stitch down, starting right underneath where the nose is, and about halfway through. It's about there. And then we'll sew a straight line down. And that completes the embroidery part, so we can tie a knot now, just like we would normally on the surface, by looping our yarn over, grabbing just a little bit of the fabric of our work, and sewing up through that loop. And then we don't even need to weave this in, since it's going to be hidden against the hedgehog's body. So we can just cut a little short tail. I'm going to do the same on the knot that I tied so that this doesn't get in my way. And then I'll flip this back the right way, and we're ready to attach it to the hedgehog's body. Okay, so we're ready to attach the nose to the hedgehog's body. So where you attach it is sort of up to you. You can put it directly in the center of the body if you'd like. I think mine looks kind of cute, wedged up a little bit closer to the eyes. So I'm going to put mine here. And then I can go ahead and thread the tail left over from the nose through my tapestry needle. And then we are going to stuff the nose, but I like to stuff mine once I've almost sewed it all the way on. I find the fluff sort of gets in my way while I'm sewing. So to sew the nose on, we'll just whip stitch it on by going into the fabric of the body and then up through one of the last stitches from that last round of the nose. And we'll keep sewing until we're almost all the way around, because we need to add a little stuffing too. Alright, so I'm about halfway around. I'm going to take a little stuffing now and just slip it behind the hedgehog's nose. Sort of pushing it over to the sides that I've already sewn. And then I'm going to continue sewing around. Alright, once you get that attached all the way around, we'll tie a surface knot. And weave that tail end in. And then we'll give that a snip. Alright, and we have the hedgehog's nose attached. We're ready to crochet the ears and the arms and legs. Alright, so let's get started on the ear first. So we're going to begin with a magic ring. And then we'll place 6 single crochet stitches inside of that magic ring. When you've got all 6 stitches, go ahead and pull your magic ring tail. And then to finish the ear off, we'll slip stitch through the very first stitch that we made. And then cut ourselves about a 4-inch tail. And then I like to pull both the magic ring tail and that remaining tail through this last loop. Because we'll also want to weave our magic ring tail in. Alright, so that's one ear. We'll need to do this again to have the second ear. Alright, so I have both of my ears completed, so let's go ahead and get them attached. So first we need to weave our magic ring tails in, since there's no fabric to hide them inside of, since these ears are small. So thread your magic ring tail through your tapestry needle, and then we're going to use it to sort of anchor our ear in place. So I'm going to just send it straight down and through the body, right where I want my ear to be placed. And then I'll trim it once I'm finished attaching my ear with the tail. So I'll go ahead and thread my tapestry needle with my tail. And then we're going to whip stitch this ear on by going down and into the fabric of the body where we want our ear placed. And then going through the back to the front of our ear. And then repeat that same process again. Pulling tight. Alright, that's the ear attached, so we can go ahead and tie a knot. So again, surface knot by looping our thread over, sewing up through that loop, and then weaving that tail end, just like we did with our magic ring tail. Then we can cut both tails. And that's one ear done. so let's repeat the same process on the other side. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started on the arms. So we're going to make another magic ring. And then we'll put 6 single crochet stitches inside of that magic ring. And you'll want to mark that first stitch. Once you have all 6, pull your magic ring tail, and then we're ready to make our second and last row. And all we need to do is place 1 single crochet stitch in each stitch all the way around. Alright, once you get all the way around for your second and last round, take your stitch marker out. We'll slip stitch to that first stitch. Cut ourselves a 4-inch tail, pull that last slip stitch through, tighten, then tighten our magic ring and trim. And that is 1 arm done. So we need to make 1 more, and we'll attach it to the body. Alright, I've got both of my arms done, so I'm ready to attach them to my body. You can see I have both my ears attached. Alright, so we need to thread the tail end of the arm through our tapestry needle's eye. And then we'll attach them to the sides of the hedgehog's body. And just like we did with the nose, we'll sew around and up through each one of the stitches from that second row of the arm. Alright, once you're all the way around, we're going to tie a surface knot just like we've done with everything so far. And then we'll weave that tail end in. And trim. Alright, that is 1 arm attached. You need to repeat on the other side with the other arm. Alright, so let's go ahead and make the legs now. So just like everything else, we're going to start off with a magic ring. And then we're going to place 8 single crochet stitches inside of the magic ring. Don't forget to mark your first stitch. Once you've got all 8 stitches, go ahead and pull your magic ring tail. And then we're ready to do our second and final round. And we will add 1 single crochet stitch to the first stitch. Don't forget to mark that first single crochet stitch. And then an increase in the next. And we're going to repeat that pattern of single crochet, stitch, increase, 4 times total. Alright, there's my last row. So I'll take my stitch marker out. I'll slip stitch to the place it was in. Then I'm ready to cut myself a 4-inch tail to sew with. Pull my last slip stitch through, and then give my magic ring tail one final pull and trim. And that is one of the feet. We need to make one more before we can attach. Alright, I have both of my feet complete, so I'm ready to get them attached to my hedgehog's body. You can see I've got my other arm attached as well. So I'm going to thread my tapestry needle with the tail left over from one of my feet. And then the feet actually get folded when they're placed on the body. So I like to make sure that my tail end is closest to the right side for my right foot. And then I'm going to attach it about here to where like the spines and the white tummy meet. And then we'll just whip stitch the foot on. Sewing through both layers as we attach. Alright, once you've got your foot attached, we can tie a surface knot. And weave our tail end in. Trim any excess tail. And then repeat on the other side with the other foot. Alright, I have my other foot attached, which means our hedgehog is done.